Hey, Jim.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
All right.
All right, everyone. We are live streaming right now.
Everybody hear me?
Hi, John. Can you hear me?
I can.
Cool. Hi, Bob.
Greetings. Oh,
Hey,
Scott.
Jim.
How are you? Hi, John.
Hey, Bob.
Hey, Chuck. How's everybody?
Hi,
Good.
Good, man.
Oh,
How about you?
Great, great.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Lord.
Oh, we got you on today, Art. Good to see you, and Bob too.
Yeah.
Hey, John, where's that other flyer that the county has out?
Flyer?
Flyer? I got the stay the course one. Don't they have one with the, didn't they provide one with the,
Oh, yeah. I think it's on the public health website. I can find it.
Oh, can anybody hear me?
yes,
Art to
we can.
Earth.
We can.
Art to Earth.
We can hear you
Guess
and
not.
see you.
Hello.
Can
Testing
you hear
1, 2,
us,
3.
Art? Art, can you hear us? Hello, Art? Can you hear us, Art?
Go, Art.
Can you hear us, Art? Art?
Yeah, Art's on mute.
Yeah, but I don't think you can. Raise your hand if you can hear me, Art. You might have to give him a call, John, see what's going on.
Hello.
Hi, George.
What up, George?
And Gary. Yeah.
Hey, everybody.
Hello.
Hey, Gary. Hey, George.
Michelle, that's for me. Can you grab the phone?
Yeah, Art, we can hear you
Oh,
now.
never
Can you
mind.
hear
I
us?
don't- Yeah, give it to me. I don't know.
Good.
Hello. I know, John, you guys can't hear me, can you? On the,
We can now.
We can.
But can you
yeah,
Art,
hear
we
us?
but
can hear you,
on the
buddy.
phone. I can't be on the phone. My wife's expecting a call in about 10 minutes.
Can you hear us, Art?
You can hear me just fine on the video. How come I can't hear you guys?
Try just raising the volume on your computer. Hey, Bob, I haven't seen you in a while. How you feeling?
Yeah, I'm doing so good I can't stand it.
That's amazing. Great to see.
Yeah, we're good. Everybody's looking good. Does Zoom have some kind of a filter or what's going on there?
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of us benefit from the low resolution
You can
of these
pause
Zoom
and hear the
meetings.
reply.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I
Right.
remember that.
Okay, I can hear everybody. Okay, but can you guys hear me?
Yeah, you hear us?
Ah,
Got it?
gracias. Thank you.
All
All
right.
coming together.
I think we've got everybody now, so we're gonna get going. It's August 3rd, already August. 6 o'clock. This is a work session. We have a few items. Did everybody get the updated agenda, or how do we get that last agenda item to them, Andy?
You were sitting in the packets.
It was okay. 'Cause
Yeah.
I got the pre-agenda package, so, but. All right, is Carmen on? Was Carmen gonna be on with us tonight?
Yes.
Is that you? That's not Carmen. 384. So I don't see Carmen on. Who's on the phone line? Who is that? 720-384-6450. Who is that?
That's me, bud.
Oh, that's you, a picture and phone. Okay. Thanks, Jim. I think Andy might be calling Carmen.
Good to see you, George.
Oh, there she is. She's here.
There she is.
All right.
Carmen, can you hear us? Can you see us and hear us?
Hello, Carmen.
Hi,
Okay.
Carmen.
All right.
Hey,
We're
everybody.
There. Yay.
Good to see you, Carmen. Okay, we're going to start out with the body art establishments. As we talked about last time, we couldn't hold up the license to issue for a business. So we went ahead and did that. And now we're going to circle back up to see what council thinks and what the discussion should be about future tattoo parlors or body art establishments, and what kind of, we'll call it regulations, mandates, whatever we want to call it, or we just kind of want to get a list of ideas that we might want to be thinking about and putting something in place, kind of like we have done with the marijuana industry. Carmen mentioned something, and I have thought about that I think would be a good idea moving forward, and that would be to make it as a conditional use from here on out instead of a use by right. That way we kind of control whenever somebody comes in for this, we would get to decide whether we wanted to approve a use for that location or not. The other, let's see what else, do we want to set an amount, a moratorium on how many establishments that we would like to see or that we would allow in town, and distancings from, do we want to look at distancings from schools, from parks, from liquor stores, from a certain distance from marijuana dispensaries? I'm just kind of trying to open up some ideas and some conversation to kind of get going here so we can jot down some ideas. We can direct Carmen how to take us forward. Carmen?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, if you remember from the materials that I forwarded to you the last time we talked about this issue, there are really a number of different approaches that you could take to body art establishments, including the option of taking no particular additional action and simply allowing them to locate as any other business in the commercial zone district. That is the status quo as of today. As Mayor noted, and as we discussed before, in previous years, actually for quite some history in the city, that was not the case. Body art establishments had to go through the conditional use permit process to locate. And that means they would come through a land use process, planning commission recommendation, and ultimately to you to consider whether or not the particular impacts of the business might have some adverse effects or impacts on neighboring properties or the area, whether it's through traffic or parking or lights or vibration, depending on the CUP, but depending on the particular business. In body art establishments, in this case, let's compare and contrast with marijuana, perhaps. I dare say that body art establishments maybe don't present the same sort of land use issues in terms of impact on adjacent properties through, let's say, odor. That was a big thing that council dealt with when considering marijuana establishments, in particular when they would want to grow some product there. So body art establishments, it seems to me, council have potential concern to you as a council and to the city that relate to the internal function of the establishment, the health and sanitation of what goes on there. And to get at those sorts of issues, as Mayor noted, you could use a conditional use permit process, although I'll say that is usually driven, again, by land use issues that are particular to the city at large or the neighborhood. Another way, and this could indeed be additional to, not in lieu of, a CUP process, but another aspect, another avenue to potentially regulate these businesses is through a licensing process. So again, analogizing to marijuana businesses or even alcohol businesses, we have a local license that they must obtain, those kinds of businesses, to operate. Those licensing requirements allow our city clerk, Dave Built and Dan Wester, our building code folks, Chief Malanka, and the police department to go into a proposed business and inspect, make sure that is up to building code, that in this case, perhaps health and sanitation requirements are met. And as we mentioned when you initially talked about this before, I do not believe that we would have to reinvent the wheel to have a local licensing process in terms of making up some standards, because the state does have some health and sanitation standards in place for body art establishments and body artists. What we discovered was the state just admittedly doesn't do very much policing of its own standards. So a licensing process, a local one, is another avenue that council could explore. Again, in addition to or in lieu of, completely up to you.
You know, it seems to me that the easiest approach here would be to simply limit the number like we have on other types of businesses. And also, I wonder if this original establishment is in business, is there any problem applying the special use permit to new ones, since that's a different standard than the original one?
Great question, Councilor Boland. A conditional use requirement, a conditional use permit, again, because it is a land use application or entitlement, that is not a requirement that the city could retroactively apply to any establishment that is already located in the city. They have located either before under a CUP process or for the most recent application under our current land use code. And as you know, generally with land use code. That code evolves, but we don't retroactively apply it to folks. They are what is called legally non-conforming. However, licensing is different. In Councilor Boland and Mayor and rest of council, the city could apply going forward a new licensing requirement on existing businesses. We have done that in other contexts. Marijuana is another example. So that is an avenue to hold any already established businesses like this to whatever you decide to do through licensing. Good question.
Thank you.
Chuck, any thoughts?
Oh, I like Bob's idea about limiting. It seems to me in a town our size that 2 should be sufficient.
So we could do that and just put a cap on it. So, and that's, I think that's a good idea as well. I would suggest, and Carmen can answer if this is okay, I would, maybe we restrict them from the historic district, that they couldn't occupy one of our historic buildings downtown.
Yep. Absolutely. Again, for particular zoning restrictions, that is something that you could explore, and you could make them indeed a use by right or a CUP, a use by condition, in particular districts, for sure. Do that, Mayor.
Could we limit their hours of operation?
Yes.
So we can say they need to be closed by a specific time?
Yes.
I would like to see that.
Okay.
How come it is that we would discriminate on a type of business?
I'm sorry, say that again, Jim?
Why would we discriminate for these rules against a type of business?
Discriminate by how many we want to have?
In like their hours and where they can and can't conduct it or whatever.
Well, I can speak to the limit of them, just like we did with the marijuana. We don't want all of our. I personally wouldn't want a lot of our establishments in our buildings being taken out by, all of a sudden we have 10 or 12 shops here in town, tattoo shops in town. And this is not really a way of protecting somebody's income, because that's kind of what we went through with the marijuana industry. They wanted a moratorium because they didn't want to share the market anymore. And
sure,
we listened to a little bit of that. And back then the council thought that was a good idea. And also we did some other things with marijuana, like they were looking around just at any building they could get to grow in. And they could have bought up 5 businesses in town and grow and had grows in them. So we could, we as council put a limit on that, so it didn't take up all of our commercial space. The times of them, I'm sure that by 10 o'clock at night, anybody that has one of these is going to see that probably the town's pretty much shut down for the evening. But I mean, they could have people driving up from Denver. So, I mean, that's just a question from Art and a response from Jim. That's what work sessions are about.
Well, my question was because, and I have limited exposure to that type of industry. The chief did make some comments last time we spoke about it, about sometimes people getting a little rowdy because maybe they had too much to drink and they go get a tattoo that they don't remember and stuff like that. I know that's limited, but they are right across the street from a senior home. If I guess that's what you would call it. And I don't know if the activity was too late, if that would be disturbing to them or not. But that's one of my thought processes. There's group of older people in that building. And I don't know if there would be, if there any kind of disturbance at all, but the industry as a whole does not have a great reputation, to my knowledge, as far as certain areas of their business. That's all. Whether it's true or not, I have no idea. I'm just bringing it up.
Oh, come on, Art. The biggest criminals in the world wear ties, not tattoos, bud.
Well,
Jimmy, you are 100% right on that.
Thank you, sir.
Amen, Jim.
well, not really. White crime is not as white crime is not as a large of a issue as others.
I didn't say white crime. I just said crime.
White crime meaning people with ties is what I'm referring to statistically. But
All
you know,
right. Any comments, Scott?
Yeah, I'm kind of seeing things like Jim. We don't want to, as government, try to be too restrictive to business. I think putting a few restrictions on, as far as the number of two, I think supply and demand kind of takes care of that, but I'm okay putting a number of two to it just to restrict how many we have. I don't think that's being too unfair to the businessman.
I would argue it would be actually helpful to the existing businesses.
Yeah.
And so I think in that regard, it's a big plus for them, potentially.
Yeah, and I would also add that it may be less of a burden on us in the future, as it's readily apparent the state really doesn't lift a finger to teach policing of this industry.
Diane,
Yes, ma'am.
how many of these businesses do actually already exist in the city?
Body art establishments,
Yes, ma'am.
one.
Just the one. Okay.
And I might add, in all the 20 years I've been here, I could probably count on both my hands the inquiries that I've gotten about tattoo parlors, body art establishments. Well, because it was by conditional use and therefore somewhat restrictive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I found that to be interesting, Council, from sort of a policy perspective and a practical perspective. When Diane and I were talking about this a few weeks ago, she shared that with me, that she had gotten over the years a few inquiries, and imagine none actually came until recently, because her experience, correct me if I'm wrong, was when she advised what the process was to get a CUP, that, for good or bad, served as a deterrent. So put that in your discussion, I suppose, in consideration of what your goals are.
You know, I was thinking possibly it could be interpreted that the fact that the state does not feel it necessary to vigorously enforce any of these regulations, that they simply may not present a problem. The
That may be
reason
so.
is to the devil.
Well, just also a little history. I believe when the county had its own health department, it may have been more regulated by the county. But since they don't do it anymore, it has become a state issue.
Another thing.
Oh, sorry, Mayor, go ahead.
Another thing that we need to also think about is like where myself and John Curtis live, we're actually C1. So could these be a home-based business? Could I open up one in my home? It's in the right, it's zoned all right. Could that happen? Is there a restriction that we want to put in there that these could not be a home-based business?
Yep. Good point.
Oh, I would absolutely second that, Mayor.
No, I agree with that. But, you know, I don't see a problem in his historic district though with tattoo parlors.
No.
I'm like other people say, I don't know that much about them. Never been in one, so I don't know.
As far as the definition for body art, is that, if it's just a piercing, if it's a piercing only, is that considered body art?
It is. And those are defined by state statute, Councilor Pennell. Anything kind of like that, anything permanent, or I guess maybe semi-permanent, that you might do or have done to your body would generally fall into the parameters of body art. One thing we as staff have not to this point done for you, council. Again, we've laid out some options for you and provided you in the last packet when we discussed this, the regulations that are in place at the state level. What we haven't done is provide you with any sort of a survey of sort of what other communities have done. I'm not sure, sometimes when you're considering entering into a new regulatory realm, that's interesting, helpful, maybe persuasive for you to see what other communities have done. We could do that. I'm not sure what sort of urgency you all are feeling in deciding on an avenue tonight or not, but just wanted to throw that out there. That is maybe a little more information that we as staff could endeavor to get you as you consider your options.
Well, we're studying the options. We could put a moratorium on any more of them, could we not?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So I like that idea, is researching some smaller communities that have allowed body art establishments in their communities. I don't think that comparing the Lakewood or Golden or something like that would give us a good idea how they're regulating it. They're big city, it'd be much different. So I like that. Getting some research done, maybe see if other communities have policies or they have something in their municipal code that we can, like we said, not reinvent the wheel, but take some things and some language from them and create our own from it.
Go ahead.
Council should know that when this discussion came about, I did get on the listserv and asked throughout the entire state what regulations municipalities do use, so I could get some guidance or a starting point. And I got absolutely 0 responses.
I'm wondering if Andy has any experience with this discussion at Federal Heights. I think you were involved in Federal Heights, were you not, for a while? Not this arena, certainly, but.
I do not recall any specific regulation other than business license requirements.
Okay. All right.
And to Diane's point, it may be that it's not a common area that municipalities regulate. I will say, even in my experience on a similar listserv for attorneys, sometimes people don't hop in, or maybe they're shy, or maybe not every community has somebody on the listserv. So there may be some stuff out there, or, gee whiz, council, maybe if you would like a survey done and we indeed do that, we discover, as Diane sort of anecdotally suggests, that nobody really enters that fray locally. And then you would know that. So we can absolutely look into that no matter what the results yield. And to Mayor's question, and Councilor Boland's point earlier, in the meantime, if it is your consensus and pleasure, you could push pause on the status quo through, sorry about the glare, through a moratorium while you take the time that you would like to take to look at what other communities do and consider what we have the resources to do.
I think that would be good for all of us to hit the pause button on this.
Absolutely.
That would just be like a resolution, Carmen, to put the moratorium on.
We do those by ordinance. We'd be directing the clerk to essentially not follow the business licensing requirements of the code, right? So we would be, you'd be telling her to not follow the code. We would want to accomplish that by ordinance. Council as many of you have experienced, we could do that by an emergency ordinance if you like. Moratoriums usually are sort of emergent.
And just so council understand, the emergency, that means it can go in once we get the vote on it. We don't have to wait for a first reading and a second reading. Pushes us out 45 days to get through, or actually more than that, to get it into law. So what's council think about doing an emergency ordinance on this on next Monday night on our regular meeting, as we continue to think, even not together, make a list of some things and we can compile that and come up with the ones that we really want to hammer down on and come up with our policy and our the way that we'll go ahead and do business with the tattoo establishments.
Yeah, sounds good.
Sounds good.
Everybody okay with that?
Yep.
All right, cool.
I want to correct something I said. Meant to say white collar crime, just for Jimmy's edification.
Oh, I knew what you meant.
Okay, well, I wanted to make it official. I don't make mistakes very often. I wanted to make sure I got this, not just teasing. I just want to make sure it was, I properly identified what I was talking about. Thank you.
All right. Okay, Carmen, we're giving you direction to draft us an emergency ordinance for next Monday night. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Second part of business tonight, the COMBA MOU. Does everybody know the acronym COMBA, Colorado Outdoor Mountain Bike Association, right?
The O is silent.
It's what?
So the O is still part of Colorado. It's just Colorado Mountain Bike Association.
Gotcha. All right. Thanks for being here with us tonight, Gary. We got in our packet what this MOU consists of, and I hope everybody had a chance to read it. I didn't see anything that would throw up a red flag. I think between insurance being covered, the manner that construction needs to be done has to come through city council. So city council is on top of and is fully aware of what's going on. The communications back and forth with the city, I think it lines it out real well. And I guess David Knox and John Kane will be the contacts as this moves on. And so what I'd like to do is just kind of give the floor to Gary for a minute. And I'm sure you've done these kind of MOUs before. Didn't you do one with the park up on Floyd Hill? Kind of the same thing, Gary?
Yeah, we have the same agreement with Clear Creek County right now. In fact, we modeled this one very much after that same. It's probably 95% the same words, I would expect. We've been involved in this latest iteration of the VCamp project for about 3 years now. That's mostly been talking head sessions with some field work done by our crew and some paid by Tony's or paid to Tony's group to do that work. But as we move into the construction phase here, it's always nice to make sure that we understand sort of the rules of engagement and that we're able to provide our services in a manner that the city is comfortable with. So having an MOU like this just kind of outlines everything for everybody and gives us a chance to dot any I's and cross any T's before we start moving dirt up there, hopefully in the next month.
Okay, council, any questions, comments?
I noticed that there was a termination on this and we renew it at the beginning of the year. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's a format that the Clear Creek County attorney was most comfortable with. He liked the fact that it would terminate automatically and renew automatically for 4 terms. It doesn't make any difference to us how we handle that part of it. So we were happy to see if that's the way you wanted to do it as well.
Andy?
Mayor, that is pretty typical with these types of agreements to have that automatic renewal, that they're annual agreements. And Also, whatever direction council gives tonight, it would be subject to Carmen doing her final review on this as well. As Gary mentioned, this is based on an established MOU between CAMBA and Clear Creek County that's been successful the last few years. There are some changes to it. We integrated a section on the use of power tools, which is a specialty, and you'll see that in item 6. But we will have Carmen review it before it's brought back to council for final approval on Monday, next Monday.
And by power tools, I want to make sure you understand that's like all the way up to a pretty good sized mini excavator.
You have a fee schedule that goes with this?
We don't. Typically, most of the work that COMBA does is free. We employ volunteers. As we get into paid construction, we work that out sort of case by case. And that's what Andy and John and I have talked about for this standpoint. The MOU really covers anything that we would do without a fee, and lays out the fact that anything that we would require a fee or appreciate a fee for would be a separate agreement.
Andy?
Just to add to what Gary said, that's exactly right. And then, as you'll notice in the agreement, MOU, there are a couple provisions for reimbursement, like of diesel fuel costs for the power equipment. So there are some minimal costs that could be reimbursed for all the volunteer labor that's performed. Any project or trail building that involves cost would be brought back to council as a separate agreement for council's approval. So CAMBA has been a great partner these last few years. They know trail building, they know trails, they know outdoor recreation. They've been part of the stakeholder group ever since the very beginning of VCAMP being discussed. And they're going to be a wonderful asset to the city, and because we don't know a lot about mountain parks and trail building, and they're going to be continuing as advisors to us. And then if we are contracting out, for instance, if the proposal is to contract out some trail building, we can consult with CAMBA about that, and then bring back whatever the proposal is to city council at a separate time.
I would assume there's some materials that are going to be needed for this, right? And the city's going to be supplying those, or?
I think under the MOU, that's certainly a possibility, yes. I think it specifically itemizes diesel fuel. Gary, are there other things that you're thinking of that might be reimbursed?
Only if we get into maybe machine or tool rentals, that sort of thing.
Right. That's in there as
But
well.
we're currently working with you guys right now on the strategy for construction, which includes the next topic, getting a grant and figuring out where the funding is going to come from. Once we have a sense kind of, how the funding is going to take shape, we'll be able to put a strategy together for what we hire companies to come and do, what we try to do with our own in-house group that has a little more overhead, but way less than a professional trail crew, and what we can do with volunteers. So we'll sort of keep developing that picture, but by and large, there's not a lot of materials involved. I think, as we look at the nature of this project and the idea of having some built features, and obviously there may be some material cost around that. Largely diesel fuel is one of the big lifts.
Well, it's nice that diesel fuel would be one of the big ones. Most folks have a lot bigger problem than that. I'm going to apologize if I'm jumping ahead, but it occurred to me with these GOCO grants that this would qualify for some in-kind work that we could use in the grant process, because I noticed the wording for in-kind work, both City of Idaho Springs and its partners.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like that could also be very beneficial, because we wouldn't have to kick in a lot of city money.
Yeah, definitely want to talk about that when we take up the next topic. John and I haven't had a chance to compare notes yet on what we think we can do in kind. So I think what he's presenting is that sort of maximum cash output, which would be the full in-kind amount of 10%. But we'll reduce that, I think, pretty substantially with contributions of in-kind from the city, from COMBA, and potentially from our partners as well. That's just typical. I mean, we do these grants every year of this size, and we usually put together a pretty good amount of in-kind work to help bring that cost down for the cash match.
Gary, once you start the construction, do you anticipate, I know John Kane's involved in a lot of things, that there will be a lot of time spent coordinating issues of the construction where he's going to have time restraints or anything, or is it a daily thing that you would meet with him, or how often would you have to, how many hours you think this would put on his plate?
Yeah, the division of labor is something that we haven't figured out yet exactly, as we're just now are moving into the construction phase, like I said before, and sort of getting our strategies together. One of the things that we have to decide there is exactly how much time does John have to put towards this project versus what COMBA can do to relieve that strain on the city's resources.
All right, any other comments on the MOU? Let's get past the MOU talk and then we'll move into the grant. Is everybody okay with the MOU and us signing it and entering this MOU with COMBA?
Yes.
Carmen will review everything to make sure the insurance is all good, insurance agreement, and we're not liable for things, right?
Andy?
And this will be on your agenda next Monday as an action item for approval once Carmen's had a chance to review it and we make a few corrections in it, a few minor changes that I've noticed.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good with it.
Thumbs up, everybody, for giving Carmen direction to, okay, very good. We'll get that done. All right, we're gonna move into how we're potentially gonna pay for some of this stuff. John's been working on a grant in our packets. If you notice, there was a pretty big, large, substantial number that GOCO has got to put into some of these projects. So with that, I'm going to let John take over and explain where we're going with this and what we'd like to see happen.
This grant opportunity from GOCO is a one-time thing, and it's related to the COVID pandemic. And it just became available. It has $15 million in it. We thought it was a good opportunity to think about the hiking trails specifically in the park. In my staff report, we had briefly considered adding a downhill trail for mountain bike into this. But I think what we're thinking is that building the hiking experience in the park will benefit the largest portion of our community. It increases access to the open space. And as you all know, Idaho Springs does not have a formal trail system for residents of the city that's accessible without driving. So, in terms of COVID, we're not really supposed to recreate more than 10 miles from our homes. This will allow every resident to recreate in this area under like a travel restriction, which is kind of a good thing. So in my staff report, the last trail, it's called West Down or WDHMTB. That was a downhill trail we had considered because there is some uphill mountain bike trails that are the hiking trails as well. But I think we're thinking that that trail would be built in a different phase since it's more specific to the mountain bike community. The matching funds, we have funds available to use for match on this grant that's already established and were earmarked for the trail construction projects. That's the money that we received from Feast on the Creek in 2017 and 2018. And that money was to go for this project. I know we have at least $27,000 in that fund. We had an accounting, we wanted to clarify the accounting from the last year. So I contacted the Clear Creek Greenway Authority just to make sure that the money was, that I knew exactly the dollar amount that we got from that program. And I think basically we can cover that 10% match plus some more, which in GOCO land is really good to match higher than you're supposed to because it makes you more competitive. Gary reached out to GoCo, and I also reached out to a contact that I have in GoCo. And it sounds like this project could really kind of fit the need of what they're trying to accomplish, which is recreation safely outdoors, within the bounds of the public health orders that have been issued and what we know may happen this fall.
And
the really
and
good
in
thing
your
about
community.
Yeah, exactly, for our community. One of the really cool things about our project for this as GoCo project is there's supposed to be immediate things that we can do to address recreation in our community. These projects are essentially shovel ready. They were designed to a corridor standard, which means that we have identified certain building techniques that should be used within it's a 30-foot corridor, right, Gary? I think.
It's 30 to 50 from center, yeah.
So basically, it gives the construction crew a little bit of flexibility when they're on the mountain so that if they run into a condition that they need to address, they can do so. So that's kind of what we're asking for. There's a letter that I had added. It's called a governmental support letter. And basically, what we're trying to do is just show GoCo that this is a city effort that we've put significant resources into as a community. There's been a community outreach process, which is detailed in the Virginia Canyon Mountain Plan or Mountain Master Plan. We had a survey regarding this, several public meetings, there was a task force. And so this process has been, and it was also funded by GoCo, the planning project. It was a $67,000 grant, I believe, from GoCo. So there's significant state resources in this project, as well as time that we've spent in the city. And building these trails ultimately is going to benefit, it really increases access to outdoor recreation for our entire community.
Is this on the same lines as the grant that we applied for a couple of years ago, probably a year and a half ago, that we got turned down on? Is that
that was a CPW non-motorized trail grant, and that deadline is October 1st. So one of the things that we're doing here is we're applying for this GoCo grant, which the deadline is the end of this week. But because of the emergency nature of the funding, they're doing an especially quick turnaround. So we're expecting to have an answer back by September 10th as to whether or not we would receive the GoCo funding. And that leaves us 3 weeks to decide what to put in front of CPW non-motorized again this year. And the reasons that it did not get funded last year through the non-motorized had everything to do with the Argo project, the access to the land, the sort of multiple layers of the project. So to kind of supporting what John said, if we really just concentrate on the hiking trails for this effort, I think it becomes a really clean argument for a city amenity. Doesn't matter if a gondola ever gets built, doesn't matter if a bike trail ever gets built, the city needs hiking trails, and that's what we want to start with.
And I think that was I think they were putting too much emphasis on the gondola having to be there to be able to use this park. And I think that hurts on that. Just couldn't get it through their heads that no, we can operate this park without the gondola.
Exactly.
It's not dependent upon that. So
and that's the way I couched it with Chris with GoCo last week, was to make sure he understood that this was a hiking infrastructure amenity. Really shouldn't worry about the whole rest of the complexity of the project.
Okay, thanks, Gary. Andy?
So in summary, this grant, if it's awarded, would provide us sufficient funding to build a hiking trail from the base of the mill right there at Riverside all the way to the top. And then also a side trail that would go to that first peak as you go up that trail. If there's a lower peak that you can get to, and then to the top peak. So it really is, if this grant gets awarded, we can build this hiking trail from top to bottom, and then that separate trail that goes to the first peak. It provides options for people, whether they want a shorter hike to that first peak or a longer hike all the way to the top. And it would be a huge boost to getting some trails in this park. John, so with the change that you mentioned earlier, not having that last item, the downhill mountain bike trail constructed, what would be the total cost of the grant submission then?
It is I want to say it's 360. It's hold on, I can figure it out.
Minus the 116,000. You just answered my question, right?
359, 358 and some change.
I just want to make sure council has that number so you know exactly what we're applying for. And then also what the match would be, John, if you could state that as well.
My calculator's
Your match at that level is going to be 36,000 if you did it all in
Yeah.
cash. I would think that we would be able to dial that considerably down in the more in that 27 range that we know that the city already has.
Yep. And again, just to emphasize, we have 27,000 approximately in hand from the fundraisers that occurred a couple of
Right.
years, Feast on the Creek, plus the in-kind match that we can put together from Kamba, perhaps from the Argo. So that's how this would be put together. Normally, if we didn't have, we got very little notice on this grant as a quick turnaround, as was mentioned. Normally, this would go to city council as an action item to get approval to submit the grant. But what we're asking for is direction this evening to allow us to go ahead and submit this grant by the deadline this Friday. Understanding that we can't wait until Monday in order to submit this grant application.
And direction to submit the governmental support letter signed by council.
Right.
What's the maximum grant we can apply for?
It's unlimited. We have had this conversation. It's a $15 million fund, and they said that it's unlimited within reason, for projects being constructed. So that's why we had originally considered that downhill mountain bike trail as well. But in Gary's conversations with, you can speak to it, Gary, it seems like we would be better served to bite off this full complete hiker trail project. And we have established costs for that already. And so that's kind of how we arrived at the ask.
Yeah, when I was speaking with Chris last week, we were looking at really a budget of closer to 250 for the grant. We've decided to go ahead and add a little more trail to that. And we're going to run the draft by him tomorrow and get some feedback prior to the final submission on Friday, just to kind of toe dip a little bit, make sure we've got our arguments correct, make sure the budget lines up with what they're comfortable awarding in this round. The 15 million is covering 4 rounds, or at least 3, maybe 4 rounds. So it's not just all available all at once to any one particular body, but I think the argument is soundest around the recreation within your community for the hiking trails, and gives us the best chance of securing that funding and really kind of queuing us up for another grant with the CPW and Non-Motorized Trails Program in October. Really, between the two of those and the potential of the Argo revenue, we've about got this thing covered.
So right now it's listing the uphill biking, but this is just for hiking only. The uphill biking would be a future.
Well, all the trails that we're talking about building would be built to a hiking spec and would eventually allow uphill bikes to travel on those. So they would be a lot less manipulated than a normal bike trail, whether uphill or downhill. And we're kind of keeping, we're being fairly conservative, I guess, in some ways with our construction estimates in terms of those costs. We're asking for more than we should really need. It's rugged terrain. The building could be complicated. It could go easily with the hiking trails. It just depends on, do we run into bedrock? Do we run into other issues? So we're kind of asking for more than we think we're really going to need to be on the safe side, just to make sure that we can get those hiking trails, which are really kind of the spine of the system, constructed hopefully this fall.
Would this possibly alleviate or reduce the loan from Argo Mines?
I think it would, Arthur. Yes. And that's one of our goals, is to see how much we can get built with grants and other funding and volunteer labor. So yes, I think we've talked about that. I think it is very likely to reduce the amount that we would need to get in the form of an advance from Argo ticket sales.
This will also make it easier for the city to manage this property. As you know, we've had some informal mountain bike trails that create a hazard for the city just because the city owned land, and that illegal shooting range that was up there. This will allow us to better manage that property from a public safety perspective as well, because there'll be formalized access.
If we get this first phase to go through and not involving the Argo, what's the current parking situation for just these hiking trails?
We have permanent easements across the Argo property right now for these trails. We considered adding a trailhead area to the grant, but really the idea here is for community recreation. So we really tried to separate out the idea of this is like for pit or for our, for the city of Idaho Springs residents to recreate here without having to travel. And so that's kind of the tack we've taken. There's still the parking that's available on, the public parking that's available on Riverside at CRC Park. I think 75% of the residents in the city live within a mile of the trail system. So, it is, especially with the Greenway, a fairly easy walk. There's people up on Pine Slope and the other side of the highway and over on the west end of town that don't have that kind of access. So we're still gonna have parking available over there, what we have now. But I think future parking improvements would come with a more, when the trail system is broadened to have more kind of regional appeal.
I'm just thinking we're gonna have a lot of outside activity, not just locals, but we're gonna get interest outside of the city. So hopefully it keeps moving forward.
Andy?
Remember also that as part of the Argo final development plan approval, there are parking spaces there will be parking spaces along Riverside that will be dedicated to mountain park use only, not for riding the gondola. So, and as John, it is something we're gonna have to monitor. I think it's a very valid point that we're gonna have to manage the use of that and the parking and make sure that it's addressed.
Yeah, because the second phase is not approved yet. We're gonna have, if we get approved for first phase and something gets stalled, then we'll have to have a backup plan for parking a little bit.
And to Gary's point too, we want to design these trails to be for Idaho Springs, no matter what else happens in that area. We want these to be a permanent formalized trail system for hikers, no matter what happens with the Argo development. And, it'll work with the Argo development. It'll also work independently.
Which means some basic infrastructure things like trailhead signage, wayfinding, a little bit of branding. We're working on some quotes from various sources for that work too.
We did include money as well in the program for wayfinding signage. And we were thinking that wayfinding signage could direct, it may even come into town a little bit, like potentially have signage at the visitor center that points that direction. I mean, there's a lot of direction we can go with that, but we just want to make sure that we've got a good, clear wayfinding system there as well.
I have just kind of a sidebar question for Gary. What is the membership of COMBA? I'm just wondering what the scale of the organization is.
We have about 1,400 members.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's good.
All right, any final questions before we get, before we have John finish up that grant and get it going? All right. Great.
And the letter, is the letter okay too, Mayor, that I had attached something like to that effect to just support the grant?
I think it's fine. Did anybody have
Okay.
any changes they wanted to put in? I thought it was just fine, John.
Okay.
All right. Holiday exception leave. We don't have the chief with us. This is coming from Chief Malenka. And I'm gonna let Andy talk about this and explain it to us. But he's on the phone. All right, we're waiting on you, Andy.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I was just talking to Chief. He's been out of town and he does still want to join for this last item, this work session item. And so if you could pause for just a few minutes and then he'll join us. We're going to resend him the link. John, would you resend him the link, please? Chief Malenko?
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, while we're waiting on Chief to get on, let's go ahead and talk about This is the census coordinator. So I got a call from Commissioner Marlin, and then George is on with us tonight. And the question was, somebody's talking. Anyway, George informed the city that there was some money left over. Ula, her position with the census, she's pretty much done all she could do. So there was some money left over, and Commissioner Marlin was asking a couple of things. Actually, there was 3 items. He asked if you don't know already, the county has hired a recovery coordinator. She was hired, I think she came on middle of last week or something. She's been drinking through a fire hose on trying to get caught up. And George was asking, and the commissioners were asking, there's about, George, help me with the total amount that still remains in that fund.
Depending on what we decide to do moving forward, we have, if we did nothing, we would have $12,000. We have $6,000 of money that we think could be spent to good use for getting people to fill out the census. But we are in a situation where there are just diminishing returns. We think about 75% of the people have filled it out. And at some point, sending a letter to somebody and knowing there's a 75% chance of already seeing it isn't a good use of money.
So a couple of the items were, could the county keep Ola on to help the recovery coordinator up through the first of the year? And could the county keep that money to help continue to pay her? The number that I was first quoted was around 1,000 or 1,200, but George came back and said it would actually be back to the city $2,500 out of the $5,000 that we contributed to the cause. Also, George said that they could potentially find more work for Ola to expend that money out. And so that's why I'm bringing it to the council to kind of get a feel on how we've given the $5,000. We can have the right to ask for it back, to put back into our general fund and move on, or use it in the ways that George has asked for that remaining of that money to be used. Do I have any comments?
Well, George, I was just wondering, just in terms of the value of this money to Idaho Springs and in making sure the count is more complete, I was just wondering if you could connect the spending of the 5,000 or whatever dollars to direct benefits to Idaho Springs, to our residents.
Well, I think that if you look at our neighboring counties' response rates and you look at ours are much better. When you look down in Jefferson County and the Denver metro area, you see that they're doing better than us, but we're doing better than Gilpin County, than Summit County. We've spent a lot of money on marketing the census and put in a lot of effort. Idaho Springs has been a great partner. I know Mayor Hillman, John Kane, Chris Malanka have all been out, making this a top priority, and we're in pretty good shape. So we do have some money left. It's 12,000, like I said, 12,000 if we decided not to spend another penny. There's about $6,000 that would pay for, there are 2 things that we could continue to do. One would be to send one more postcard. And we have these VMS signs. You've probably seen the one kind of by Safeway. That's being paid for with this money. We could decide to rent 2 of them for another couple months. If we did both of those things, we would have $6,000 left in that census budget. Idaho Springs contributed 20% of the funds that are remaining. And so that means that if we spent 6,000 of the 12,000 and then called it done, Idaho Springs would receive 1,300. If we decided to just not do anything else census related, Idaho Springs could get back, that's where we get back to 2,500 roughly. And then the third option is to ask our census coordinator to stay on and assist with the recovery. And that is really something that I'm attracted to as it comes to using Clear Creek's money. I know that Empire, Silver Plume, and the Henderson all agree that this is a good idea. And EDC's board has yet to talk about it. But just to give you some context, that recovery position is something that it really is a critical need. This is the person who is figuring out what our needs are as a community due to COVID, where the resources are to help people, whether it's paying rent or finding business grants or building our strategic recovery plan. It's a very critical thing. And this position has through December to get us a strategic recovery plan. That's the only time that is funded for this position. So Ula, our census coordinator, is an individual with a background in economics, a background in statistical analysis. She was a vice president of operations for a corporation managing multi-million-dollar budgets. So she really has a skill set to help with this and build out these needs assessments and just help us advance more rapidly than we can with just our one recovery coordinator. So I think that would be a great use of these funds in a way that benefits all of the communities that contributed. Some evidence to the fact that we sort of see the recovery function as something that benefits everyone is that the existing recovery coordinator is paid for out of CARES funding. And we all agreed, we said this position is important enough. We're going to pay for it out of CARES funding and make sure that we have this happening in our community. So I'll stop the speech making. I apologize for being long-winded.
George, I'm going to agree with you on this. You know, I think it would be money well spent. And if I'm not mistaken, doesn't the CARES money have a limit of December 31st?
Yes, and so that position that we hired is only on through December 31st, unless we find additional funding. Now, what this proposal is for essentially for a second person to be able to help out with the recovery function. We'd get about 6 weeks. So we spent $6,000 on census work and then kept the other $6,000 for the census coordinator to stay on and work with recovery. We'd get about 6 weeks, and that's enough to accomplish a significant amount of work.
Okay, thank you very much. That's good.
So Art, you have any comments or any thoughts?
No.
No? Jim?
Nope.
So how would everybody like to see, or what direction can we take the remainder of this money?
George, are you just looking for a recommendation, or is this something that doesn't need our approval, right? You can go any direction with this. You're just looking for our consensus or ideas.
No, I believe, and Carmen's still on, but I think I've got this right. This money was voted on and funded by a formal vote of the council. So that's what the census is, what that money has to be spent on. We would have to get, we would have to put something on the agenda at our next regular meeting to be able to reallocate this money and put it towards a different cause.
Yes, that's right, Mayor. That's right.
You know, considering the value, I think the value we're receiving for every one of those dollars is multiplied many times, considering the situation. So I really would support letting it all stay with the original intent.
I agree with Bob. I think this, you gave her a resume would be quite productive in getting us back more than we would get just with the 1,300 or the 2,400, whichever we would get back. I think she'd be way ahead on getting us some benefit from that small amount of money.
I agree.
Don, Curtis?
Agreed.
Well, just since sales tax is down, you know, to keep any money that we already have would be my only thought on that, you know, rather than cutting more projects or something like that. So that's my thought.
And I'll have to say that I'm having a little bit of difficulty, you know, where we really haven't seen the crux of our sales tax. June and July are really gonna tell the tale. And you know, $2,500 doesn't seem like a a lot of money, but that's almost a month's salary for some of our employees. So I'm kind of, it would be going to, I believe, a good cause. We did hire, the county hired a coordinator to manage the recovery. And I think that was what, about $45,000 for 6 months or something, George, somewhere in there.
We put 39,000 in the CARES budget. I'm actually not sure what her salary is.
Yeah, because I know it was something and it got raised a little bit to show somewhere close to a salary for that type of position. So I'm just throwing my 2 cents worth in, but I believe we have consensus of most of council to probably allow that money to stay there and let it be used to pay for OLA to continue through the end of the year, I believe is what it is. Andy?
So, Commissioner Marlin, would you just clarify again how the remainder of that money will be used? I know it would be used, the recommendation is to have ULA stay on to assist the recovery manager. Am I also understanding that part of that funding will be used for additional census outreach, or could you just break that down one more time, what is being proposed?
Yeah, I'm happy to. And I think, yeah, you point out this, it is a dynamic situation where we have decisions to make about census, and then we have decisions to make about what to do with the money that we don't spend on census. And so for that reason, we have a meeting scheduled for Friday at 10 a.m. And I think what would be helpful would be for somebody from council to attend that meeting, or staff, or whoever you guys want to authorize to attend that meeting. And then we can all of the parties that have these funds can sit in the same virtual room and get this figured out. Breakdown of the money, we have $12,000, roughly speaking. There is about $6,000 worth of census work that we think could be beneficial. These VMS signs in particular have been really showing good results. And then the burn rate for the census coordinator is about $1,000 a week. So if we decide that we have $6,000 that's unspent, that would get us 6 weeks with this individual as a full-time employee.
Okay, thank you.
No, I agree with Mike. I struggled a little bit at first with that, as I indicated to him, but particularly the census part of it, where the returns really are extending out for the next decade to us, that I don't think there's any question that is way worthwhile. We have no way of predicting, how many times this will be returned to us and in what manner. But even with the COVID situation, I really do support the whole request at this point.
Okay. With that, we will have that on next week as an action item on Monday night. And we can give you the outcome of that next Monday, George.
Excellent, thanks, guys.
And you said Friday is the meeting?
Yeah, Friday at 10 a.m. And so just let me know who is going to be the Idaho Springs person there, and we'll make sure you get an invite.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.
Okay, thanks, George. Thanks, council, for that.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, we're going to drop back to the holiday exception leave. Chief, you're on. We got the documents in our packet, so we've all had a chance to read it over and kind of give you your explanation of this, please.
Okay. And thank you for entertaining the thought. The employees that are exempt, and all employees get it's 10 holidays. I think it actually might be 11 if you count the Friday after Thanksgiving. Unfortunately, the exempt employees that are in the police department don't often get an opportunity to take those holidays because we're scheduled to work. We don't receive a pay differential, and what we're finding is that essentially we're missing out on those holidays. For Mark, what I have done is I've exercised my authority to give him administrative leave days equivalent to the number of holidays he's had to work. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to formalize a third category or a second category of leave for exempt employees that work the holidays. So essentially what this was is if you work a holiday, you get a holiday. And then we could bank those up to the 80 hours a year, but it's use or lose. So if the exempt employee does not use those holidays by the end of the year, it goes back to zero.
I think that's way fair.
And the only two employees we're talking about is you and Mark. Is that correct?
Well, it's me and Mark. I mean, any director can work a holiday. It's really up to them. If there's some emergency or some crunch, I mean, I can see any director having to work a holiday. So what it does is it allows us to take advantage of those days. So really, it's no loss to the city other than the employees are actually getting an opportunity to enjoy a day off.
Right. Any comments or questions, council?
So what about the rest of the exempt employees like John and water superintendents? You know, they end up sometimes working holidays or have to.
Yeah.
Would this include them too?
It would include all exempt employees.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Yep. And
Well-
then non-exempt employees receive a holiday premium and also time and a half.
So are we just asking if you work a holiday, you're gonna get another day in lieu of that holiday?
Yes.
That's fair. That's
Yeah.
totally,
Yeah, that's a gimme.
yeah.
And I'd like to I'd like to formalize that in our handbook. So, any director that comes in the future, I mean, it's already laid out. Not that we were pushing the envelope, but it was a little confusing for Kelsey. So this will make it a little easier. It would include creating another category of leave. Right now, our sick and vacation leave falls under PTO. So we'd have to come up with another category for this type of leave.
Yeah, I think that can be done though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think formalizing it makes all the sense in the world.
Okay.
It does.
And
Agreed.
okay, and if you don't object, I'd like to request that it's retroactive for this year. So maybe, Mark and I can recap a couple of the holidays we worked.
I don't see any problem with that.
Yeah, that's the way it should be.
Okay. Very good.
Absolutely.
For now.
Corman, can you give us direction on what our next steps would need to be to make this happen?
Sure, Mayor and Council. Actually, this is somewhat timely because there is or are some additional amendments to the city's employee handbook that Andy and I have been corresponding about that derive from Senate Bill 205 of last year, which concern mandatory paid time off for sick leave, not only due to COVID and during times of public emergency, but generally the state legislature acted to adopt some minimum sick time requirements. And as you maybe remember, Mayor and Council, we as a city, as the chief just pointed out, we have PTO, we have paid time off. We don't differentiate between sick leave and other kinds of leave. So my point is, Mayor and Council, we have some cleanup items and some employee handbook amendments that we are preparing to bring to you anyway. So this is really timely. What I would like and what I heard from council is consensus to grant the chief's proposed amendment and to include those in an employee handbook amendment. What I'd like to do is bring that back to you with the amendments that I am going to recommend to you in response to the Senate bill for paid time off. And as Chief noted, we could make those provisions retroactive such that he and the lieutenant can operate under the understanding, right, that these amendments will be made in the meantime, even as we prepare them, so that they can know that they're generally authorized to use that leave. Is that an okay plan, Mayor and Council?
Yeah, I think that's
Yes,
good. John Bordoni,
absolutely.
you have something to say? John Bordoni?
Mayor, if I may, I'd like to make a suggestion based on Chris's. If we just made an alternate holiday, which would apply to all employees, because I do have a lot of employees that work holidays, even salaried employees, that would much rather have the day off than have the overtime pay. So in my past life, we had an alternate holiday. So you could take Christmas the 1st of December and then work the 25th. And you still got that holiday pay in there, or you got the day off. And we had 30 days to use that holiday within that month. So
believe
you use
that was,
Christmas within that month or something like that.
I think that was called a floating holiday.
Correct.
And I had a question for Chris and council with this exception time, whatever it's called. Would the bank be paid out like PTO would be paid out
No,
to quit?
no, it's use or lose.
Use or
Yeah,
lose
I
it,
don't,
yeah.
I think it's reasonable that, you know, if somebody elects to leave or they retire, you know, and they have exception leave built up, that they can use that, but there's no remuneration. You can't cash in exception leave.
And do you lose that annually, or is
Yep.
that something that you can bank from year to year? Or it's just
No.
lost annually, right?
No, it should be annually because every other employee, you know, they can't bank it. It falls on a specific day. So it's just a form of equity that everybody gets the same number of holidays off.
It's too
So-
much to keep track of if you.
Yeah,
carry it
yeah,
forward.
yeah. And it's not uncommon in other cities. If you haven't used it by January 1st, then you forfeit it.
Andy?
One advantage of that setup where you use it or lose it is it reduces the liability to the city of the amount that has to be paid out in accrued leave. So this really isn't a typical accrual. It's just allowing flexibility to use the holidays within the year. And if you don't use them use your hours by the end of the year, you lose it and it resets. Some other places, particularly for public safety, another way to approach this is to just allocate the 10 holidays at the beginning of the year, in our case, and then the employees can use them throughout the year. So that's another way we could consider managing it. Chief, I don't know if you've given thought to that, but no, so you have a block, you'd have 80 hours of holiday at the beginning of the year that would go to you and to the lieutenant. And then you would use that at your discretion throughout the year. Understand it has to be used by the end of the year.
Sure.
Do you see a benefit to the situation you describe as opposed to something like that?
No, I don't think that's unreasonable. It's, you know, it'll be a little, you know, record keeping will be a little different because the days off won't necessarily be affiliated with a holiday, but no, that seems very reasonable as well.
Okay.
All right.
John, just to be clear, when I heard the term floating holiday used, when I think of a floating holiday in some places, that's like often in in a lot of situations, that's actually an extra holiday that can be used anytime throughout the year, like an additional holiday that can be used for your birthday or for your anniversary or something like that. I just want to make sure I understand that we understand what you're proposing, John, is that in December, if an employee, if an employee is scheduled, if you're scheduled to work, we'll take you. If you're as an exempt employee, if you're scheduled to work on the 25th, December 25th, and you say, I'm going to instead, since I have to work that day, I'm going to take the day off on December 1st. You would
Correct.
still get the holiday pay on the 25th. Is that right? When the holiday hits? Am I understanding?
No, I mean, you would get the day off on the 1st, but
Okay.
then you would work the 25th.
Got you. So
So
you
it's basically an alternate to that holiday that month.
Okay.
So Christmas is the 25th. I take my Christmas day on the 1st, but I work the 25th.
Okay, so you take the day off on the 1st, December 1st, and then you work the 25th, but there's no difference in pay. It's the
Exactly. There's no differential.
same benefit, other than you have to work Christmas Day.
Right. Other than you just get an alternate day off.
Okay.
I'm not sure, Andy, if the labor laws permit someone to work on a holiday and not get time and a half. Would that be allowed, or?
I think it's allowed for exempt employees, but not for
Yes.
non-exempt.
Right, right.
For most of our employees, you have to pay time and a half, or if they elect to have time off in lieu, they would have to sign an agreement for that.
I certainly know that CDOT doesn't do that. Believe me.
Andy, I can see another benefit, and that is, it seems to me that it would be more culturally and religiously sensitive, because maybe it's real important for folks, just for a hypothetical, to have Passover, or Kwanzaa or other holidays that may happen during times of the year. Give them an opportunity to take advantage of that.
Good point.
So Carmen, can we come up with something that accommodates all of this to get into our updated employee handbook?
Yes, Mayor, I think so. As I mentioned, I'm happy to bring such amendments back to you at the same time as Andy and I work on some other amendments concerning leave in response to COVID. So absolutely, Mayor, Council.
All right, we'll get that done.
Okay.
Thank you, Carmen. Chief,
You bet.
Is that it? You sold it?
That's it for me.
All right. Man, we're going to give you some icicles to go sell to Eskimos.
Yeah. Well, listen, thank you everybody for the consideration. This has a lot of meaning for also when you're looking for new directors in the future. This will be of interest to them as well.
Thanks, Chief.
Good
All
point.
right, with that, Scott, did you have something else?
Nope.
All right, any last chance for final comments tonight? All right, good work session. Thanks everybody for the input. We'll get these things going. We'll have some things on the agenda for action next Monday night. Gary, thanks for being here with us also. With that, thanks everybody and have a good night.
Y'all have a good one.
Good night.
Be safe. Good night, everyone.
Council.
Good night, all.